Hello and welcome to a Thanksgiving edition of the Kama Sutra Show. It is called the Kama Sutra Show because we'll be going position by position through Thursday's three-game main slate. If you're catching this on YouTube, if you're catching this on the podcast stream, it is free, as you can tell. The main slate version of this each week is indeed part of our subscription at Establish the Run. You can try that right now if you're not a member yet. $4.99 for 1 week trial. Normally $23.99, $39.99 for a 1 month trial. Normally $64.99. Boys, three-game DFS slate. Always a fun slate, the Thanksgiving slate. Whether you like the slate or not, it's always great to play DFS on Thanksgiving. Wiggins, good afternoon. You're on mute.
Not a great slate. I was thinking maybe I wouldn't play it, and then I sat around today, and I thought, I'm playing. So I'm in.
Wiggins is in. Evan coming to us from, I don't know, looks like childhood bedroom, perhaps. How's it going?
No, I didn't spend my childhood in this house. But, yeah, the bed is not made behind me. That's not my fault. You're looking nice and young and clean shaven. I mean, I'm like 38 going on 58 here.
Yeah.
We're looking real old in these parts.
Yeah. All right. Let's get into it with this slate. I think from an overall perspective, and getting CeeDee Lamb back, and we're projecting CeeDee Lamb in right now, getting him back on the slate, I think makes a big difference in terms of guys you can spend for, guys who can break the slate. I think the macro theme of the slate, though, Wiggins, is it's kind of hard to spend your money unless you're going through a very few specific guys. There's not that many good skill players on this slate. So what do you think of it as a whole, Wiggins?
Yeah, there's a little ebb and flow because we think we're getting CeeDee Lamb back in the player pool, which is good, but then we might lose Ingram, which it's not that Ingram is as much of a play as it would make Tony Jones a really good play. So if we end up not having CeeDee Lamb and not having Ingram, like you almost can't spend your money. So it's a little unusual, but some of the most expensive plays like Ezekiel Elliott, I don't think he's going to be like super chalky. So you can maybe get a little bit contrarian by spending up. Diggs doesn't project as like a great play, but I think people are going to play him because it's an easy stack. And again, you need to spend your money. So I don't know. There's some levels like that about figuring where the ownership's going to go. So I think there's some interesting things you can do in GPPs. Cash, it's going to be pretty thin, but maybe you can pick off some idiots that are just playing for fun and want a little sweat on Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I misspoke earlier. Kama Sutra Show means we go position by position, not game by game. But we're going to go game by game here because I think it's more interesting. And also we're going to have Nick Underhill on, one of the great friends of the show, one of the true friends of the fantasy community. Nick Underhill covers the Saints for New Orleans.football, and he'll be on at 5:30 because there is a mess going on with the Saints, which we'll get to when we get to that game. But Evan, let's start with a mess in itself. It's going to be Andy Dalton against Jared Goff to kick off your Thanksgiving. Now, we talked about how Andy Dalton, I think, is better for the pass catchers than Justin Fields was. And that's not to say he's a better fantasy play, but for the pass catchers, better. The problem is no Allen Robinson in this game. So we're going to get Marquise Goodwin. We're going to get Darnell Mooney out there with Andy Dalton. What do you think about how Dalton plays Sunday and anything on the Chicago pass game?
Yeah, I mean, he's playing the Lions, and, it's a good matchup period. The Bears over the years under Matt Nagy have had like by far their most success against the Lions. Everybody has success against the Lions, but the Bears like stomped the Lions. Mitchell Trubisky, his best games are consistent. I mean, he would consistently play well against the Lions. I think that what it does, the Bears are willing to allow Andy Dalton to drop back a lot more than they are for Justin Fields. When Justin Fields is under center, they want to be very run heavy and conservative, but they will let Andy Dalton throw the ball, 25, 30 times. And that's, Darnell Mooney, we saw 16 targets last week. I think he's got a floor of like 7 targets. And we just saw his ceiling in terms of target volume. I think Andy Dalton is fine. I think that he's, I don't know, maybe like the number 4 quarterback on the slate. I don't think people are going to be excited to play him, who would be. But I think that he makes life easier. Yeah, he makes life a little bit easier, I think, on Darnell Mooney and Cole Kmet in terms of target volume.
Yeah, and you can get Andy Dalton at 5,500, but I think the real appeal of playing Andy Dalton, if you want to, in tournaments is that Marquise Goodwin, track star, Olympic star, deep play threat, is only 3,800. He's going to run a ton of routes. And Darnell Mooney, now that we know Allen Robinson is out and Dalton is starting, is also underpriced at 5,700, at least slightly underpriced. So I think that stuff is at least worth noting. Cole Kmet, who burned a lot of people last week, I think is in play again as a contrarian kind of 3,700 guy. And again, I think all these guys get boost with Andy Dalton. Wiggins, what do you think about this game? It sounds like you're interested for tournaments.
Yeah, I am interested because more so on DraftKings and FanDuel, but you've got Goodwin and Mooney, who are both like top values at wide receiver. They're going to get on Mooney in particular, but they're also guys that break long plays. And we saw it last week. Mooney took a slant 60 yards to the house, and then Goodwin had like a 50-yard touchdown late on some broken coverage. And that's all you really need. So I like it because you can get a cheap stack. The other thing that you can do by attacking the early game is you get a lot of information. And if you haven't listened to Establish a Million, Drew and Leone through their Drunken Stupor talked about this a lot. And it was a really valuable discussion about how you have so much more information with the games being spread out. So if you get in here early and you hit some stuff in the early game that isn't that owned, you can go super chalky the rest of the way. And that's really valuable. So I do like kind of attacking this early game because I think there's some solid plays that aren't going to get owned. And then we'll have that added information. And on the flip side, your day could just be over right away and you can go off and go eat some turkey if everything goes poorly.
I do want to say on the Chicago side, like the best play maybe on the entire slate. Actually, probably my favorite play on the entire slate is David Montgomery. I mean, David Montgomery is only 6K on DraftKings. Everybody runs all over the lines. David Montgomery, I mean, I thought maybe Khalil Herbert would stay in the mix. I thought maybe Damian Williams would stay in the mix. The Bears have not done that. The Bears have loaded up David Montgomery with all the work, Evan. So it's hard to poke holes in this spot for David Montgomery. Like this would be a spot where I would consider David Montgomery at 6K on the main slate, let alone a 3-game slate where there's nothing else. So if you're going down team play the best plays, I mean, to me, David Montgomery is the best play on the slate. I don't think we can poke much holes, if any, in him. Do you see any problems, David Montgomery here, Evan?
No, since he returned from the hyperextension of his knee, 2 games, 85% and 95% of the Bears' offensive snaps. Khalil Herbert during that time, despite playing well in David Montgomery's absence, no love for him. 4 touches, 1 touch in those 2 games. David Montgomery only got 15 touches and 15 touches in those 2 games, but I think that's a number that could rise significantly to the extent in a neutral to positive game script setting like this projects to be. I mean, at very worst, neutral. I mean, he could he could go for 30 touches. I mean, like that's within his range of potential outcomes.
We have David Montgomery projected for nearly 60% ownership on this slate. And then, so that's where the game theory bros are going to get in there and go for David Montgomery fade, which I think is viable, but I could see him get even higher than 60%. Like he's really, really tough.
I mean, do you think highest owned player on the slate?
Yes.
Yeah. And that's another reason why I like playing Dalton. It's obviously you're not playing Montgomery with him. I shouldn't say obviously. I think you could play Montgomery with him, but to me, there's more value in getting the leverage there and getting off Montgomery. I do think he's a great play. I would certainly play him in cash games, to be clear.
Say Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara both out. Well, we know that Alvin Kamara is going to be out. Say that Mark Ingram is out too for the Saints. Would Tony Jones be higher owned than David Montgomery?
Yeah, that's a good question.
We have it like we actually have Ingram and Kamara both projected out right now. We have Tony Jones around 46% projected ownership and David Montgomery up at 58%. So it would definitely be close.
You should note that we do look at other ownership around the industry as part of our calculation, and we're the only people that have Ingram out right now. So that number would come up. I think if we had clear confirmation on that Ingram and Kamara were both out, I think Tony Jones would be the highest owned on the site. So that's a good point.
Let's talk about Detroit side, Evan. Jared Goff is expected to return from his oblique issue. His number 1 wide receiver is a dude they picked up who was cut by the Titans, who don't exactly have a strong wide receiver core anyway, in Josh Reynolds. He knows Josh Reynolds from their time together in Los Angeles, but he has Hawkinson. He has Swift. Jared Goff has racked up garbage time before. What do you think about this spot for Jared Goff? Because I don't think really anyone is playing Detroit pass game stuff.
Well, I thought it was interesting that Josh Reynolds jumped right in and led all the Lions receivers in snaps. Last week, and he does have the shower narrative from the Rams with Jared Goff. I mean, it's an ugly receiver core, right? I mean, Josh Reynolds couldn't even cut it with the Titans, who are like the most desperate team in the league for receivers. But I mean, he knows Jared Goff, and he had some flashes those two had some flashes together with the Rams.
Mhm.
So, I mean, he's kind of a sleeper. I think Amon-Ra St. Brown has a chance at, 8-9 targets in the right, scenario. Jared Goff, playing at less than 100% is a little bit scary. But I don't know. I know that the Establish the Million guys were talking up Jamal Williams.
Yeah.
I know it's gross, but yeah.
I'll say this about Jamal Williams. So we just did the props show,
Mhm.
and I was talking about DeAndre Swift under 108.5 rush plus receiving yards. And part of that is that maybe Jamal Williams plays more in this game. Like, let's say that it was his first game back last week. He got eased in a little bit. Maybe he plays a little bit more this week than he did last week. DeAndre Swift needed a 57-yard run to get there. But that brings me to DeAndre Swift, Wiggins, because he's going to be very popular. I mean, especially on DraftKings where DeAndre Swift profiles so well. We have him at over 50% ownership on DeAndre Swift, up at 7,300. Like, he would be a play on a main slate where I'd be like, yeah, I think it's fine. I won't be falling all over myself to play DeAndre Swift in this spot. But on this slate, on a 3-game slate, Swift sticks out, I think, just because his profile, the way he scores fantasy points, is so friendly on DraftKings. What do you think about handling Swift, and what do you think about Swift? And I don't know if you've thought about cash at all or not.
Yeah, well, I have thought about cash. I think you're playing Swift in cash. I think, just to note on Jamal Williams, like, it's really just a game theory play because Swift is going to be so heavily on. I would not anticipate Jamal getting work back in. I mean, look, they don't have much. I think they understand that Swift is like, they basically just got to keep feeding him and hope that he breaks a 60-yard touchdown, which he did last week, and he's done a bunch of the week. So I think he's, kind of, what we've seen is what we're going to continue to see from Swift, but he could get hurt or whatever. Weird things happen. So I do think there's some game theory there, but Swift cash game play, yes, on both sites. Tournaments, I mean, look, if he's going to be out there as much as we've seen, he has a pretty high floor because he catches a bunch of passes. The Chicago defense is not very good.
They're really banged up too. No Akeem Hicks, no Khalil Mack, no Danny Trevathan.
Right. So I like Swift a lot here.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that the thinking behind Jamal Williams would be maybe he could fall into the end zone a time or two. He can play in the passing game. I think that what's the most touches you could see from him? Like 12, 13 maybe. And then if like this is, not a very good Bears team. And so if the Lions are able to maintain, or maybe grab a lead or, stay within a score, then Jamal Williams could get more work than usual. But I don't know. This is why Leone and Dink win millions of dollars.
Well, a 3-game slate is totally different. You don't even have to make a case for it. The only case that you need to make on a 3-game slate for these large field tournaments,
people aren't going to play him.
People aren't going to play him. He's going to be on the field. Period. That's the only case. You don't have to analyze it too much because 3-game slate, there's not that many options.
Yeah, and Levitan, you were kind of pointing out that Swift, if this were a main slate and we had a bunch of other options, we probably wouldn't play him in the spot at this price tag. It's just that you have to spend your money somewhere, and there aren't really other good running back plays, especially not in that price range. So it's kind of artificially driving his ownership up. And so just another thing to consider.
Reeve asked for the cheap volume Turkey Day wide receivers. I think the strongest ones would be Marquise Goodwin and Cedric Wilson. We already talked about Goodwin. We'll get to Cedric Wilson later. We mentioned Josh Reynolds. He's stone cold minimum. If Lamb ends up getting ruled out, Noah Brown is stone cold minimum. And then there's other guys that we can talk about later who I don't really think are strong or don't project for 5 targets, but guys like Gabe Davis and Deontay Harris and Brian Edwards. But yeah, I definitely think Cedric Wilson and Marquise Goodwin would be the strongest ones.
I wanted to clarify something. So with no Allen Robinson, the Bears 3-receiver set, obviously Mooney, right? Mm-hmm. Mooney was off the injury report today. That's a good sign.
Yep.
Then Marquise Goodwin and Damiere Byrd.
Likely
That's
Byrd.
what it looks like.
Yep.
Marquise Goodwin's listed as questionable.
Yeah.
Did you see his practice participation today?
I can find it. I think he was full today. I think he's fine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I just, just to get it out there, we got to pin down these, who's going to be playing. Certainly no one's going to play Damiere Byrd.
Yeah. Marquise Goodwin was full listed questionable. So who knows what the hell the Bears are doing? Full on Monday, full on Tuesday, full on Wednesday, questionable. So whatever.
Right.
Okay. Let's get to the next game here because we will have.
Hold on, should we hit on the defenses at all there? Because they're particularly on DraftKings,
Sure.
They're the cheap defense. I don't have much of a take. Curious if Evan does.
Yeah.
They're both the Bears are 3,000. So I think one interesting consideration, like we have the Bears projected for more than the Bills. Personally, I would go the Bills there. So I think on the high end, that's a question, and then on the low end, it's either Lions or Raiders. I think the Lions are going to be pretty chalky, so I would try and stay away from that in GPP, but I think they're totally fine in cash. I guess that's my defense take for the game.
Yeah. And we didn't mention Hawkinson, but I think it's the same story every week with Hawkinson. Few tight ends have the ability to catch 7 or 8 passes. We know his floor is very, very low. Anything stick out to you on Hawkinson in this matchup, though, Evan?
No.
Yeah.
No.
It's just the same story.
Do you think he'll get played?
It's the same thing every week.
You know, the established million guys thought that he would be fairly low owned, and that would make him a good play. We're projecting him at 24% on DraftKings and FanDuel 21%, which seems about right. And I think he's a fine play at that percentage.
Yeah. I mean, 3-game slate, 24% is like that is low. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay. Let's go to the second game. Dallas versus Las Vegas. Another spot for Dallas to kind of come home and bounce back. We saw them do that once before. They have an embarrassing performance against the Broncos, come back and blow out the Falcons, then have a pretty embarrassing performance at Arrowhead. Now they have a chance to come back and play well against the Raiders. I think they will, but no Amari. We'll see on CD. I think we're projecting CD in right now. I have not seen a Tyron Smith update yet, but generally speaking, Evan, what do you think about this spot for Dallas? And we can start with Dak in the pass game.
Yeah, the rhetoric has been like almost stunningly positive regarding CeeDee Lamb's chances of playing. At first, I just thought it was, typical Jerry Jones, Stephen Jones bullshit, blowing smoke up our ass. But it seems like the beat writers have kind of embraced that he's likelier than not to play. Hopefully, we get some sort of confirmation before the game. I suspect that we will. Yeah. If he plays, I think that he and Michael Gallup will play primarily outside, and Cedric Wilson will be the slot receiver. I think that Dalton Schultz will be in an awesome, awesome spot. I mean, he played 99% of the snaps last week. He led the team in receiving. But I think that it's I don't know. The Raiders have not been able to score since their bye week. They've scored 16, 15, and 13. I think that the Cowboys might want to really rev up their run game here. And I mean, the guy that I've been looking at a lot, and I love Tony Pollard, just as a player. So I'm certainly like pro Tony Pollard, and I have that sort of innate bias. And he has been crushing it in terms of efficiency this year. He's number 5 among running backs in yards per route run. He's always been efficient, but he's averaging the most yards per carry of his career, the most yards per target. He is the thing is that he only has scored 1 touchdown. And if he had scored like 4 touchdowns, everybody would be talking about, oh, you play him every week, but he's only got 1 touchdown. Zeke on a short week, talking about how he aggravated his little knee injury. I think he's largely fine.
Yeah.
But this could be an opportunity, especially if the Cowboys get a significant lead. And I think they're favored by 7.5 here. Tony Pollard could get a lot of work late in the game. I also think that due to the, relative shortage of playmakers, period, why wouldn't they make him a bigger part of the game plan?
Yeah. I think there's a question, Wiggins, between Cedric Wilson and Marquise Goodwin at the cheap range. Cedric Wilson is 35. Goodwin is 38. They both save you plenty of salary. What do you think about Cedric here, and how would you compare him to the other cheap guys?
We've got Cedric projected for 0.3 more on DraftKings. To me, he feels like the safer play. He's going to be higher owned. So I think, interestingly enough, we have Goodwin projected for more ownership. I think that'll flip once everything shakes out. So I think I would look at Wilson in cash and Goodwin in GPP is kind of what I was thinking here.
Yep. And agree on Dalton Schultz. I mean, we've seen Dalton Schultz certainly have big games. There's a lot of viable tight ends on this slate. And we'll get to the New Orleans stuff in a second, because I am intrigued a bit by their tight end situation as well, with Adam Troutman going down. But yeah, certainly Dalton Schultz very much in the mix. Hawkinson, obviously, and Waller. On the other side of the ball,
I want to get you guys' take on Pollard. I mean, maybe I'm like a little too obsessed with him, but I want to hear you guys talk about him.
Pollard is 5,600 on DraftKings, so like he's clearly overpriced for his role. Like absolutely no question that will keep Tony Pollard's ownership down. I think Zeke practiced full this week, but he's certainly not looked right in a lot of the season to me. And so on a short week, I could see them trying to get Tony Pollard more stuff. And the other narrative that I was trying to tell myself on Tony Pollard was if CeeDee Lamb was going to be out, they're going to be like, oh, this is our time to get Tony Pollard, some more work as a pass catcher, et cetera. They just haven't done that all year. But yeah, I mean, like we don't root for injury, but like the in-game injury risk on Zeke, I think is real. And Tony Pollard would just be an absolute smash if that happened. I don't know, Wiggins, do you have any Pollard takes?
Seems like Zeke has left the game for series, a few times this season. He certainly did it last week. I thought it looked kind of bad. I was kind of surprised he came back, but then he seemed to be fine. But I mean, he's certainly not 100%. So yeah, I think it's a totally fine play. You're overpaying. Zeke, we've got coming in at 47% ownership on FanDuel, 40% give or take on DraftKings. I'd rather do the play on DraftKings because you can get bailed up by him catching some passes. But we got Pollard like in the mid-teens, which is really low for a 3-game slate. So I think it makes quite a bit of sense.
Raiders giving up a lot of production to RBs as well. I wanted to just mention that Tyron Smith is back for the Cowboys at left tackle. So that means this is might be the first time all year that they've had both of their tackles in Tyron Smith and Lyle Collins. Graham Barfield had a good tweet showing the on-off splits for when Tyron Smith is in the game. And I mean, he's been a difference maker in terms of those stats.
People are asking. I think I was going to hit on the same point. You were just going to ask about Zeke and Cash. Is that where you're going?
Go ahead.
I don't think I'm going there. It's just I just don't feel super comfortable about where he's at. I'd rather spend up at receiver, particularly for CeeDee Lamb. So, and there's some other cheap plays at running back that I think are preferable.
Oh, I would play Diggs straight up over Zeke, like for sure. And Diggs is 7,900. Zeke is 8K. I mean, and that brings us to the Raiders because Josh Jacobs is 5,900. I mean, 2,100 less than Zeke is Josh Jacobs. And I don't have a problem with Zeke at all, but 2,100 is a ton to Josh Jacobs, who kind of has a similar role. He loses some work to Kenyon Drake, just like Zeke loses some work to Tony Pollard. Evan, how would you think about Josh Jacobs and Kenyon Drake in this spot against the Cowboys?
Well, Josh Jacobs, he hasn't topped 13 carries since week 6. I don't think he's topped 16 carries in a game all year. But lately he's got, if you're just looking at his game logs, his receiving numbers look pretty good on paper. He's got 4, 5, and 5 catches over his last 3. It's 7 targets last week. But I still wonder if that's, a little bit fluky because they can pop up with Kenyon Drake, all of a sudden taking over the routes run, like at the drop of a hat. Mm-hmm. I mean, he is a guy that, can fall into the end zone a time or two and be, the guy that we don't want to play him, but then, he's the guy you need. He definitely has that. But, it's a split backfield on a team that hasn't been scoring, facing a Cowboys defense that has been very restrictive when it comes to allowing fantasy points to RBs. So Josh Jacobs doesn't really check any boxes. How generous, by the way, of Leone to be giving away his signed Josh Jacobs.
If you guys haven't watched Establish the Million, you have to watch it. It's so good. But yeah, Josh Jacobs is not a guy I feel like we ever recommend, and I'm not recommending him tomorrow.
I do think Kenyon Drake is at least interesting in MME builds where they get behind and Kenyon Drake can catch 3, 4, 5 passes. And on this slate where you don't need that much at running back if let's say it's a huge pass game that goes off or something, if you have a bunch of doubles with cheap running backs, I think that's at least viable. On the other side, we talked about Jacobs. Let's talk about Waller and the rest and Carr and the rest of the pass games. Unlike Dalton, I could see Carr having a better ceiling. Dallas has been pretty good against quarterbacks though, man, and they're talented on defense still. And what do you think about Carr, wide receivers, Waller, et cetera?
5 of the last 6 quarterbacks to face the Cowboys finished as the quarterback 17 on the week or worse. So they have been very limiting when it comes to quarterback production. And the Raiders offense is just died since their bye week. And, they miss Henry Ruggs. I mean, he had really started to come on as a playmaker. And as a guy that makes a difference, even when he's not catching the ball, just his field presence, they went out and they got Deshaun Jackson, and he's got one target, I think, in 2 games. It's hard, it's hard. And, Darren Waller's a stud, but he's also a guy that defenses can neutralize. And, Hunter Renfrow is like, a little slot receiver. So they're really short on weapons at this point. And the way that Derek Carr played early in the season while he was balling out, he was throwing the ball downfield and he was making plays under pressure. And that's never really been his game. So it was just kind of like, I think, a little bit of an outlier as opposed to the rest of his career. And he sort of regressed back into what he actually is.
Yeah. So I think the problem is that like he doesn't want to throw deep, and he especially doesn't want to push the ball down the field to Zay Jones and Bryan Edwards, who just like can't play, So everything ends up going to Waller. Everything ends up going to Renfrow. We just bet a Kenyon Drake over on receiving yards. And so I think all that stuff is in play. But yeah, the Waller Renfrow stuff, it's hard for me to get my head around Edwards and Zay Jones. They've been so bad, but they're out there a ton. And like, as I said, on a 3-game slate, when guys are out there a ton and nobody plays them and they're cheap, it's at least worth mentioning.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah. Bryan Edwards we talked about this before the season, just a horrible fit for Derek Carr's game.
Yeah. All right. Let's get to the Saints game. Honored guest is here. Welcome, everyone.
Oh.
New Orleans .football. Nick Underhill, battling with Jordan Raanan all year to be ETR's #1 beat writer. Nick, thanks for doing the show. How's it going?
Is Jordan here on a holiday week? I don't see him anywhere. So let's make sure this reflects in the power rankings.
Exactly. Let's make sure it reflects in the power rankings. How are you, man? It's been a crazy year, I think, for the Saints with the Michael Thomas stuff. Obviously, all the quarterback issues. You have your own site. Tell the people where they can find your site and what you do on a day-to-day basis covering the Saints.
Yeah, cover the Saints at New Orleans .football. Run our own site. ETR is kind of an inspiration for just a business model. Now we went about it. Evan gave me kind of the confidence and the push to take the idea and push it over the line. But yeah, it's just, just maybe a little bit more in depth, some more film study, just kind of the stuff that I think people would rather read as opposed to what you have to write to fill space or meet a quota in a newspaper or something like that. So just try to take a little bit more of an in-depth analysis-based approach on the site.
And now look at that background. I mean, #HowRich.
It's Evan's the next Steve Jobs. Look at Evan's background.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking at him when I was backstage. I didn't want to come on and take shots. It's Thanksgiving, but like, man, like, do you need a light bulb or something? Like, I can send you. I can get an Instacart light bulb over there so we can see your face.
All right. Let's give the people what they want here, Nick. This is, we had to have you because this is like so muddled on the Saints side in so many spots. I'll just start peppering you with questions. Quarterback. I don't think Trevor Simeon has done anything to suggest that he can lead this team deep in the playoffs. Do you think they want to get a look at Taysom Hill at quarterback? Could that start happening as soon as tomorrow?
I don't think it's gonna happen tomorrow, but look, I agree with you. At some point, it feels like they're gonna have to try to shake things up a little bit and try to get some offense going, because the way he's playing, your strategy can't be behind by 14 points every single game going into the fourth quarter and then come to life. Like that's not a winning formula. And honestly, quarters 1 to 3, like, they've really done nothing. And the only time that they're manufacturing yards is in those fourth quarters when defenses are loosening up because they have such a big lead and they're kind of just sitting back. They aren't trying to pressure them anymore, and they're conceding the yardage. So he ends up with good numbers because he's killing it in the fourth quarter, and that's great, but you can't win football games like that. So at some point it needs to change. After the last one, I thought this might be a Taysom game, but watch him practice. It's a limited window. They could always bluff, but it does look like it's still Simeon's job for now.
Yeah, to be clear, we are projecting Trevor Simeon to handle his normal work with Taysom Hill mixing in for a few snaps here or there based on what Nick said there. We have that right.
We know what Trevor Simeon is, at this stage of his career.
Yeah, sure.
Is this like an ego push by Sean Payton, who, hey, he's earned it. He should have a big ego, but like, why is he pushing this with Trevor Simeon? Trevor Simeon is like a low end backup in the NFL.
I mean, I guess it's really a no-win situation. If they play Taysom Hill, people are going to say it's an ego push, and they're playing a tight end quarterback, and they're trying to force him into it. I think there are like a handful of things that Trevor does that they like. The short passing game came to life at least a little bit to some degree with him. Like it wasn't there at all with Jameis Winston. So that's one thing. He makes quick decisions, and until this last game, he at least wasn't turning the ball over. And there is like an element of them having a bunch of wide receivers who, if they all got cut today, probably would not sign with other teams, and the ones who did would get the league minimum. Deontay Harris might be the only one that commands like a little bit more of a salary, but it's a tough job right now. I mean, you're throwing to Kenny Stills, you're throwing to Kevin White. I honestly didn't know that wide receiver could be so bad until this year. Like it just kind of, always feels like, okay, this guy's out, and now this guy's going to play and he'll get, 80% of the production. And who am I going to pick up to fill in for, who's his backup? That's not the case. And it's kind of unbelievable that they just can't find guys that can make plays. But there has been a level of neglect at that position for a while. And I think it's just kind of at the surface. But quarterback wise, I just don't think they have a good option right now.
Okay. Let's go to running back. So Alvin Kamara was ruled out. What is the update on Mark Ingram today? Do you think he's going to end up playing in this game?
So I think that Mark thinks that he can play in this game, and I think people around Mark Ingram are a little bit more pessimistic than he is. I think it'll probably end up being kind of a game time decision. I heard that his knees swelled up a little bit on him. I think there's a desire, I think, for him to be the first player to ever play all 18 games in a season. So I think that's something that he wants to get done and have, as part of his resume. So I think if, by all means necessary, I think he's going to try to play in this game, probably be a game time decision, but I don't know realistically if I would count on him being on the field, and if he is, being productive.
Okay. If he's out, what do you think the Tony Jones, Dwayne Washington, Ty Montgomery split looks like?
It'd probably be Tony Jones first and foremost. I say this, but I've been saying it every week. If Ingram can't play, like it feels like there has to be a ton of Taysom Hill in this game. It feels like you got to try to get him a ton of touches, because I don't know how else you're going to move the ball. They'll try to get Ty Montgomery into some of those, Alvin Kamara looks and maybe use him in that role to a lesser degree, obviously, than they would Alvin. And then I think Dwayne Washington would just kind of be, if he gets touches, it wouldn't be too many. I think Tony Jones would probably lead the charge there.
Is the foot injury for Taysom a concern?
I don't think it is anymore. He's listed no status. It was a walkthrough week, but he was more involved in the stuff we were able to see than he was last week. Like last week, it was pretty evident that he wasn't doing anything at all in this game. And I think this week there might be a little bit of a better shot for him to be involved in a couple things.
Tony Jones was actually playing a decent amount at the beginning of the year before they had Mark Ingram, when it was Tony Jones before his injury. And that's why we have Tony Jones as projected as the lead back if Ingram was to miss. Do you think anything's changed with their opinion of Tony Jones, or Tony Jones is still lingering injury or anything like that?
No, I think that he's probably going to be the main guy. I think he'd probably be 3 behind the other 2. He did kind of maybe slide down a little bit. They went out and got Ingram for a reason. I think some of the confidence that they had in him coming into the season maybe dissipated a little bit, but relative to who's available, I think he's clearly the top guy in that mix.
Let's go to wide receivers. I mean, it's ugly, man. We think Traquan will see the most targets in this game, followed closely by Deontay Harris and Marquez Callaway. I mean, do you have any read on the wide receivers? I haven't really played any of these guys all year, but we're down to a 3-game slate here, Nick, and I'm not sure if you're aware, but many of us have gambling problems, and we may have to actually play a Saints wide receiver.
Man, if you have to play one, I think Traquan would probably be the only one I trust. Deontay Harris is going to get his targets too, so I don't think he's a terrible play, but outside of that, I wouldn't touch any of them. Like Callaway, he might make 2 or 3 plays, or you might see him drop 2 passes and squander his opportunities. He's so up and down. I don't think you can count on Kevin White, Kenny Stills. I'd stay away from everybody but those 2. But I do think that Traquan's probably a safe bet to get his 3 catches for between 35 and 50 yards. He's going to do that just about every single week. There being really no viable tight end options, maybe that helps, a couple of those guys get some more targets. So Traquan could benefit from that. Adam Troutman being hurt, he was Simeon most targeted players. So those have to go somewhere. Maybe Nick Van Nett. I don't know. Juwan Johnson might finally get some play. I don't know though, man. It's tough. I mean, I wouldn't touch any of their skill players except for Smith or Harris.
Juwan Johnson has like a really interesting athletic profile, but it just seems like they don't trust him or something.
And they did early in the season. I'm not really sure what the change of opinion was. He was getting all those 2-minute drill snaps, and I mean that's a great place to be in this offense because they do move the ball really well there, and that's kind of one of the reasons why Troutman was getting targeted so much because they get behind and they'd be in hurry up, and the tight end just seems to always be open in those looks. So those might go back to Juwan Johnson. I just don't know for sure like how that's going to spell out. But Van Nett's really never been a receiving threat anywhere in his life. So
yeah, not even in college.
Yeah. So,
buddy, I think you guys, I'm playing Juwan Johnson. I'm excited. I'm excited to play Juwan Johnson. All right. This guy is a super athlete. Troutman was like turning a corner in terms of target share. And who's to say that like Nick Vannett can do any of this stuff that we're talking about here? Juwan Johnson, I feel like, Nick can correct me if I'm wrong, much better at running routes, much better at scoring touchdown is Juwan Johnson. I don't know if the coaches feel differently, but like, let's say that, Juwan Johnson gets the full Adam Troutman role. He's only 2,500. Like, I'm actually excited for that.
Yeah. I think if you got to make a gamble and you're looking for, a high upside potential thing, like it's possible. And like I said, they're going to get behind in this game. I mean, let's just be realistic. I don't see any scenario where they're playing from ahead throughout this whole game. And I say that and they'll have one of these games where they go out and do the impossible because they beat all the teams they shouldn't beat and lose to all the teams they should beat. But it seems like they're going to be playing from behind. So that seems like they're going to be trying to play up tempo, and they're playing up tempo. That's always good for the tight end. It seems like he should be the guy in there. So if you got to roll the dice on somebody and you're looking to try to play a little bit of an edge that maybe other people aren't, it's worth a shot.
Yeah. Anything on for the people on Nick Vannett? Like, how do the Saints think of him? Do you know anything about how they think of him like a blocker or what they think about Nick Vannett's return?
So, yeah, primarily blocking. When they did sign him, one of the things Sean Payton said is that he thought he was underutilized as a pass catcher throughout his career. And he pointed out that he catches everything that's thrown him, never drops any passes. And he thought he could get more out of him than in other stops. I got to see it to believe it, though. I mean, it's just it's a nice thing to say, but he's been hurt. He's been really slow coming back from the injury. So he might not even be ready for like a full slate of snaps at this point. And if he was, honestly, I think last week you would have seen him probably cutting to Troutman's plays a little bit. I think Troutman was right on the brink of maybe losing his job after jumping off sides on that 2-point attempt and having the fumble earlier in the year. Like things were getting away from him. His last chance kind of to save himself, he did with a really good game, and then he got hurt. But I think if Van Nett was ready, you would have seen more there. So I don't think that's, as Peyton says, the vision. I don't see the vision for him to be that primary pass catcher at tight end.
I got to ask about Marshawn Lattimore, who, I don't know, maybe is having like the best season out of any Saint. I don't know. I mean, Marshawn Lattimore has done a really good job against some really big time wide receivers. Do you think they use him on Steph Diggs everywhere? And yeah, what do you think about that Diggs versus Lattimore matchup if it happens?
Yeah, I'm kind of expecting it, and I think they should, because I think when Lattimore isn't in one of those matchups where he's like super locked in a one-on-one situation, there's extreme variations in his play. And he's actually been kind of like, he started out super high this year, and he's kind of, been trending the wrong direction the last few weeks, probably since that Tampa Bay game. And even in that one, he kind of gave up a couple things. But yeah, putting him on someone like that when he's excited about what he's doing, he's incredible. And I think that's probably the best matchup for them. I don't think that you want Paulson Adebo or Bradley Roby on Diggs. That's kind of asking for disaster. So yeah, I expect him to be on Diggs, and I expect him to play well if they put him in that role.
Evan, any comments on this Diggs versus Lattimore matchup?
Yeah, I mean, the go-to matchup that we think of when we think about Marshawn Lattimore is against Mike Evans, who's 6'4", 230. Steph Diggs is a guy that, and he wins with Mike Evans wins with like power and length and size, but Steph Diggs wins with like he's a route technician. He wins with agility. I wonder if he is just gonna kind of maybe run some circles around Marshawn Lattimore.
You think so?
On the outside, Marshawn Lattimore, one thing that we've noticed is that he doesn't move into the slot very much. And, the Bills could get, and their OC is he's a game planner, and he's a guy that could look at Marshawn Lattimore 5% in the slot, and he moves Diggs inside and gets him away from Marshawn Lattimore. So, but I completely agree. I think that that's very visible that when you watch Marshawn Lattimore play, he can get up for games and he can just be fucking locked down in those scenarios.
Yeah, if they don't follow him into the slot, it's gonna be bad. Like PJ Williams is in the slot probably this week, so Diggs on PJ Williams is a nightmare situation. And you're right, he usually doesn't go inside. And I'm trying to think, like, the only times I can really remember him doing is like sometimes Julio would move inside when he was in Atlanta, and Marshawn would go with him. But other than that, teams have been able to get off of him by going inside. So, man, if they allow that to happen this week, it's gonna be real ugly, because I don't see anyone that can keep up with him. I mean, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson's out; he wouldn't be able to keep up with him either from the slot. So, that's a good point. I mean, that's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and I still, I have a ton of respect for Marshawn Lattimore. I still think Diggs, to me, is my favorite pay up option on the slate, ahead of Ezekiel Elliott, ahead of DeAndre Swift. Let's talk about the other side for a minute here. So, Evan, sounds like you like the spot for Steph Diggs, or at least think it's reasonable. What do you think about Josh Allen? Because Josh Allen is expensive on this slate, but like no other quarterback. I mean, Dak is there and Josh Allen is there. And that's kind of the thing about the slate. Dak and Josh Allen separate so much from the rest of these dusty quarterbacks. How would you compare Dak to Josh Allen? What do you think about the Bills pass game?
Well, I have a lot of respect for the Saints defense, but over their last 4 games, they've given up a lot of fantasy production to opposing quarterbacks, number one. Number two, Josh Allen can play shitty and still be fine or good in fantasy. He's started 10 games this year. He's got 18 or more fantasy points in 9 of those 10. So he's like a high floor, high upside play. He's been very up and down, I think, from a real life standpoint, but very consistent in fantasy. And the Saints have started to give up a lot of production, again, to opposing QBs. They have a lot of talent on their defense, and I'm worried about the upfront matchup of the Saints D-line against the Bills O-line, which has really sprung some leaks in recent games. That's one area where I think that the Saints could have a potentially big edge. How are you feeling about the Saints D-line right now, though, Nick?
Not good. I mean,
Really?
Marcus Davenport's out for this game. David Onyemata really hasn't been the same since coming back from the PED suspension. Cam Jordan's still a good player, but he's no longer like the superstar pass rusher that he used to be. He's useful, but he's not consistently disruptive. They don't really have another defensive tackle. Peyton Turner, their first round pick, is on IR. So, I mean, Tano Passanio's out for this game. Like, they have nobody right now on that defensive line. It's going to be Cam and Carl Granderson. And Granderson he had 5 sacks last year, but he's not been consistently productive this year. So I think they're going to have trouble getting after Josh Allen. And the biggest issue with this defense, I think, has really been explosive plays. And they give up, leaky yardage like that. And, they'll lock down, and then all of a sudden they give up a 40-yard bomb. And really, like you said, the last 4 games, it's been a trend since the Tampa Bay game. They've kind of like unraveled a little bit on defense. That's probably too strong of a word, but they looked like an elite unit for a while. And now they've just kind of been, regular good. In Tampa, they tried to blow that game. They gave up the bomb, and then PJ Williams got the pick to seal it on the next possession. But they, DK Metcalf got a huge one on them. It's just been consistent.
It looked like Lattimore fell down on that one.
Yeah, he looked like fell down, got pushed down, whatever it was. Like he gave it up.
Right.
But I mean, against this quarterback, this team, that's kind of my major concern for them, is that either they're going to give him too much time and he's going to find plays down the field, or they'll just bust and give up a big play one way or another. But I think that's probably something that's going to happen at some point during this game.
And they play a lot of man coverage, right? Yeah. So running quarterbacks can have success against man coverage defenses because the defensive backs, turn, and the linebackers turn their backs to the offense. And, if Josh Allen sees a lane, like he's going to go for it. So I think this could be a game where he runs for like 50 yards or something.
Yeah. And look, I don't know what the current numbers are. Like as of a week or two ago, though, they had like a 60-point variation in passer rating against home and away. They do not play defense very well at home, and I think it's maybe something to do with the communication factor that they can't talk to each other a whole lot in the Superdome, and they have somehow like found a way to give up home field advantage defensively.
I wanted to bring up Cole Beasley because, as Nick mentioned, I mean, Saints have a huge liability in the slot and with PJ Williams, and especially if Marshawn Lattimore is not going in there at all. I mean, Cole Beasley got his first full practice in on Thursday, first time since week 8. Cole Beasley got a full practice in, and his routes were up last week. Cole Beasley's only 4,500. It seems like we always run into these spots, Wiggins, where Cole Beasley ends up as one of the best plays on Thanksgiving. It's so sick. Like I'm like, oh God, who's the best under 5K play at Thanksgiving? It's always freaking Cole Beasley. But I do like the spot for Cole Beasley. Took on the show before over 39.5 receiving yards for Cole Beasley. So I think he's going to get into a lot of optimals. Wiggins, what are you seeing on Beasley?
It's just a question of whether he's healthy or not. And it seems like he's trending in the right direction. I mean, he was out there last week, didn't have a particularly good game. Makes you wonder a little bit, but getting the full practice in, I think that gives me some confidence. And for the role that we saw earlier in the year, he's definitely underpriced for that right now. So I think I like him. And it's Thanksgiving, and he usually plays well on Thanksgiving, like you said. So probably
and he's definitely going to get a lot of routes against PJ Williams.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Definitely.
It all adds up.
Yep. Evan, any thoughts on Manny Sanders? Has he broken the age model? Is it completely over for Manny Sanders? And then also Dawson Knox?
I don't know. He's so old. I mean, he's like, and I was going to mention he's got a revenge game. He used to play for the Saints. He's got a revenge game against every fucking team. So he's got a revenge game every week. But I mean, he's old, so, and he hasn't done anything in like a month. He's out there a ton though.
Yeah.
I mean, he leads them in their receivers in snaps and routes run like every single week.
Yeah.
So I mean, all he has to do is go chase one down and he can make some noise, but he hasn't done anything in a while.
Yeah, he's getting a lot of cardio out there. The other guy I mentioned is Gabe Davis, who's not running a lot of routes, but I think Gabe Davis gives you a chance at least some explosive play at really, really low ownership. But yeah, that would be a thin MME stuff. Anything we didn't hit on in this game you guys want to ask Nick about or anything else? We didn't really do too much on Deontay Harris or anything like that, but I don't think there's too much more to say. Any more questions for Nick before we let him get out of here?
I would just say, like, if you had to put a percentage on Ingram sitting, like, what do you think it is? Because that's just such a huge point on this slate.
It is.
I guess I go 65%. We went out there. He went through stretch and left the field, which, we get kicked out after about 15, 20 minutes, but that did not look promising to me how it kind of played out there. And then, just talking to people earlier in the morning, it just seemed that there was a lot more pessimism around them than optimism. So I lean more towards him not playing, but his desire to want to play and the fact that they have nothing there. I think that, it's probably a true game time decision, but I would be, if I was forced to place a bet, I would bet on no.
Are you going to wake up at 3 a.m. This morning so that you can compete with Schefter bombs on Mark Ingram's status overnight tonight?
No, I'm comfortable with what I know on this one. I don't think I got to get up that early. I don't think he's going to be rolled out in the morning or anything like that. But look, the good thing about those,
man. Sleep, get your rest.
The good thing about those guys is that they've started like tweeting that stuff out like at like 9 or 10 o'clock at night, or like even earlier. So like the Ian and Schefter like weird competition that used to play out in the middle of the night, like the last couple of years, if you notice, those guys, they're kind of conceding a little bit. They aren't going as hard on those 3 a.m. In and out reports.
I know. Ian from the Patriots beat, I assume, and yeah, the Ian versus Adam rivalry is a great one as well. I love it.
Team rap sheet over here, man.
Team rap sheet. Okay, there you go. All right, Nick, tell the people where they can find you on the Twitter machine, anywhere else where they can find you and your work.
Yeah, at Nick_Underhill. Website's NewOrleans.football, and I always appreciate you guys. You guys got all the crazy fantasy people DMing me for stuff every week, so appreciate all the shout outs and all the love you guys show me.
Yes, again, Nick, we might have a small gambling problem here, but that's okay. That's why we need the information from you. It's not a problem if you're winning. Okay. Appreciate you coming on, Nick. Evan and Andrew, you want to stick around? Yeah, let's just talk a little bit more. We didn't get to the other side of Dallas too much on the spot for Waller.
But can we just talk about Ingram for a second? Like,
oh yeah, go ahead.
So we have him ruled out right now. Like when he was first talking, I was saying like maybe we got to put him back in, but then at the end I was like, I don't know. I mean, just any like closing thoughts on Ingram, because I just think it's such a big point here.
Well, I wonder if he might be active and like, you know, something goes wrong, or he's just active, you know, as like a veteran presence, or, you know, and then if he's active, like then no one's going to play Tony Jones, right? So if he's active, no one's going to play Tony Jones. And if he's inactive, everyone's going to play Tony Jones.
Well, it's just so tough because it's the last game on the slate.
And it's the last game. So, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
like Levitan.
It feels like something that could really decide a lot.
Yeah. Like Levitan, what would be your lean? Like, would you play Tony Jones in cash right now, or do you think it's too risky?
No, I wouldn't. I mean, if he had an actual injury in the game last week, it would be more. It sounds like it's just like natural swelling that happens after a game to a 31-year-old who's touching the ball 20 times. Yeah, you know, it doesn't sound like it's a real.
I mean,
injury.
That's not a good thing.
Yeah, but that's not a good thing. And now they're on a short week, and
right. That's what I'm saying.
Well, yeah. I mean,
that's why the age model works.
Yeah.
Yeah. Listen, I still think we might get some information on this, but yeah, you know, it's a tough decision for cash. I don't think that you can like pin yourself down to Tony Jones though. If this is all the information that we have right now.
Yeah.
Well,
I also think we should get Ingram.
So if Alvin Kamara is out,
he's out.
Of course he's out. Sorry. I feel like Tony Jones is going to get some work regardless.
Yeah. I mean, last week, Mark Ingram played almost the whole game still, you know?
And Tony Jones had 3 touches.
Yeah. I mean, I was surprised too. I thought Tony Jones would play more also, but they didn't seem like that. But yeah, clearly 31 years old on a short week with knee swelling. I think Tony Jones will play some also. Like, yeah, even if Ingram's out there. Okay. Last thing I just want to touch on was just circle back on Darren Waller. So getting up to Darren Waller on DraftKings Wiggins is not that hard. He's 6,400, but it is cheaper to play Hawkinson. It is cheaper to play Schultz. It is cheaper to punt it off with something like Cole Kmet again. What do you think about tight end on DraftKings and how Waller fits in?
I think it's really clear on DraftKings. You play Waller in cash and you don't play Waller in GPPs because he's going to be so heavily owned. So go touchdown chasing in GPPs. You could play Hawkinson. You could play Kmet. I think Juwan Johnson is at least a consideration. I mean,
Schultz is a real good player.
Yeah, Schultz. We didn't really talk much about Schultz, but I think he's going to be the second most owned tight end above Hawkinson. So, yeah, I think you look elsewhere. You could also play 2 tight ends. I think that's okay too. I mean, Waller's one of the safer plays on the slate. I think he's a pretty rock solid play. So you can play him at tight end and flex somebody else. FanDuel is a little bit more muddy. It kind of depends like where the value shakes out, but it's kind of funny because like usually you can get whoever you want on FanDuel, but actually from what I'm seeing, like with Waller, I mean, he's perfectly fairly priced, but you might want to take some savings. Like Kmet's $5K there, Schultz is $6K. So I think they're both very viable plays. And then I think Dox and Knox, who they talked about a decent amount on Established Million, I think he's a really good tournament play. It seems like he's going to get overlooked, and you could pair him with Josh Allen and just hope he has one of those 2 touchdown games.
Yeah.
Someone asked, is the interior of the Bills defense going to be back? They don't have a single player on their injury report this week. So they are going to get those guys back. We talked about that, how that could be make a big difference against the Colts last week. Jonathan Taylor, my God. He made up for some mistakes elsewhere. The Bills interior defense is going to be back.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else you want to say about this slate? Bills running backs. Yeah, we talked about
that.
Yeah, well, I think
not much actually. Can we?
Yeah, we didn't talk about it much.
Well, listen, I mean, Matt Breida is a threat to make Zach Moss completely inactive. Like Matt Breida is playing well, and so if Zach Moss ends up active, we're going to see 3 running backs touch the ball in an offense that doesn't feature the running back very much. It's really thin. If he's out, I think Matt Breida. If Zach Moss ends up being a healthy scratch, I think Breida and Singletary are at least interesting, but still, like I'm never going to be that excited about Bills running backs. I don't know, Evan, do you have a take on how this is going to shake out with Bills running backs?
Yeah, I think that Zach Moss will be inactive, and I think that it's going to be Breida and Singletary. I just, how many touches really is Breida going to get? I mean, he can bust big plays. Like he's a fun player to, when he's healthy, like he's a really fun player. But I'm looking up Star Lotulelei because I know that they don't list the COVID guys on the injury report, which God, the COVID shit is the worst thing to ever happen to fantasy football besides spreadsheets. But we got to look at the COVID list here.
Yeah. Nah, I mean, I'm not too interested in playing Singletary. And
yeah, Latulele still on the damn COVID list. So, yeah, it looks like he's not going to play. Tremaine Edmonds is back, though.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else before we get out of here? I think Nick gave us a lot of good stuff. Thanks again to Nick Underhill for coming on. Check him out on the Twitter machine. Check him out on his site, neworleans.football. Yeah, MME tips. Like, Reeve is asking for MME tips. Like, we're not the people to ask for MME tips. I would say that I would not put very many rules at all. Like, I would pair anyone with anyone in large field stuff.
Well,
like,
Dink and Leone got like pretty deep into rules. They were talking like more about rules and like approaching the slate than even the slate. So go listen to Establish the Million. It's really good. It's free on YouTube. So
Yep. And like, it's just so obvious on a 3-game slate that like normal rules do not apply. Like playing Pollard and Zeke together, like in a large field, super large field thing, I think is okay. You know, like it's to me something weird that's going to end up happening. Okay. That's going to do it for this Thanksgiving free edition of the Kama Sutra Show. We'll be back Friday night to go position by position through the main slate. It's a 10-game main slate.
Wait a minute. We got to do more touting this week?
More. It's a 2-show week. 4. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. I know I joke a lot about Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone. Enjoy it. Enjoy the games. Get out there. Try to win some money. Have some fun. For Wiggins. For Silva. For our honored guest, Nick Underhill. I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.